Chapter 7. Something remains. Clinging to dregs of energy from a sleepless night, Ryan marched on with broken purpose. His usual sturdy stride was visibly shaken, his movements weakened by the lingering weight of his encounter with Emma and the precious little sleep he'd managed to snatch in the restless hours before dawn. His mind seesawed, swinging back and forth between doubt and certainty. Had he done the right thing? Deep down, he knew he had. Not killing Emma, leaving her behind. It was the right thing in a human sense. And somehow, the wrong thing too. She was still human, still very much herself beneath the sickness. But in her isolation, with the infection threading through her veins, she had become a danger. Not through malice, but by the simple, tragic fact of what she was. With a grunt of frustration, Ryan jerked his head to the side and slapped himself hard across the face, the sharp sting barely cutting through the haze crowding his mind. His thoughts spun like broken wheels, veering from guilt to anger, to hollow numbness, each one a weight trying to drag him down. He knew too well. A tired mind could kill faster than any sick. Grinding his teeth. He had to keep moving, had to stay sharp. There would be no safe place, not really. Only some forgotten hole he might stumble across, if he was lucky, if he could hold out long enough. And there was no telling how long that would take. But he would march on all the same, until his body gave out or his luck ran dry. Ryan's thoughts began to loosen their grip as the land opened out before him. The high ground gave way to a shallow descent, and through the thinning mist and soft, clouded light, the full sprawl of a town revealed itself. Rooftops upon rooftops, packed tight in a long, shallow bowl of valley. A stillness hung over it all like a held breath. He hadn't been able to plan a route the night before, his mind too fractured by sleeplessness and guilt. But he'd kept walking, guided only by instinct and the faded road signs that still clung to rusted poles. And somehow, he'd arrived. He stood for a long moment, wind cutting softly across the open slope behind him. This place, unnamed but familiar, was Huddersfield. It looked quiet, and very likely dead, like everything else. The sight of it pulled him out of his fog like a slap to the soul. He was back among the ruins of the world, and whatever lay within, he'd have to face it with both eyes open. Some time later, the elevated view had vanished, swallowed by level ground, and now Ryan could see only a short stretch ahead where the road wound and narrowed between the trees and buildings. As he walked, the outskirts of Huddersfield began to take shape, houses appearing with increasing frequency, each one a decaying monument to the time before. He passed building after building, all bearing the same marks of nearly 4 years of abandonment. If the world looked this wasted after less than half a decade, he wondered what another 10 or 20 years would do. How long before even the bones of civilization were unrecognizable? He could have avoided Huddersfield. He had food, water, enough supplies to skirt the town entirely and keep to safer ground. But the irony wasn't lost on him. He had to walk toward the risk to keep the risk at bay. He needed new filters, spray, anything to protect himself from RCB. And those things, if they existed anywhere, would be here, in the heart of danger. As he moved deeper into the town, the buildings began to rise around him. First modest, then looming, growing taller with each step toward the center. Their silent presence pressed in on him, markers of a world long stalled. His mind, dulled by exhaustion, kept drifting, flashing back to Emma and the night before. Doubt crept in again. Had he made the right call? Was he still capable of making the right calls? Sleep had become a luxury he could barely afford. After another fitful night, He felt the edge of his mind fray, walking a tightrope pulled taut by fatigue and regret. One more night like that, and he feared he might lose his grip entirely. He needed something to hold on to, something to push him forward, but there was no time to go looking for it. Whatever might give him that edge would have to reveal itself along the way, or not at all. As he rounded a corner, a battered direction sign came into view, its metal surface stained by time, with a faded placard hanging crookedly beneath it. Decontamination zone, an arrow pointing the way. The sight pulled Ryan into the present, sharpening his focus. At last, a tangible waypoint. A renewed sense of direction coursed through him. Something clear, something real. But it came with a sobering reminder. Where there had once been efforts to contain infection, there may still be remnants of it lurking. With his senses sharpened and his pace slowed, he pressed on, proceeding with careful intent. Following the trail of signs toward the decontamination zone was like chasing breadcrumbs. Some were missing, others barely legible, worn thin by years of wind and weather. Still, Ryan pressed on, each step cautious, his dwindling focus stretched thin as he tried to hold on to what little wits he had left. The town's condition was just as he'd expected. Wrecked. A broken husk of what once was, with the long deteriorated remains of its inhabitants strewn across the streets like discarded memories. Nowhere had been spared from the creeping calamity that had swept silently across the world, devouring it one breath at a time. Crossing onto a street marked New Street, Ryan spotted yet another sign, faded but clear enough, pointing him further toward the decontamination zone. Just as he settled into his stride, something flickered at the edge of his vision, high above the rooftops. His focus snapped upward. Two black, triangular objects glided silently across the sky, unnaturally slow. For a second, he thought his sleep-deprived mind was playing tricks. He stopped dead and rubbed his eyes. But they were still there. The objects split, breaking formation, one veering east, the other slowing mid-air before descending behind the buildings just a few streets away. Frozen, mouth slightly ajar, Ryan stared after it, shocked into stillness. Snapping out of his dumbfounded trance, Ryan broke into a sprint, heading in the direction he believed the object had descended. His mind raced with possibilities. As he neared the area, he slowed to a cautious walk, pistol drawn, every shadow now a potential threat. But there was nothing. No sign of the craft, no impact, not even a sound. Just as doubt began to creep in, a loud, shrill scream tore through the silence, cutting straight through his exhaustion like a slap to the face. Adrenaline surged. Now fully alert, he edged down the street, each footstep measured. Then he stopped, eyes fixed, breath caught. He beheld a sight that made the blood drain from his face. Partially hidden behind a parked car, a strange mechanical mass shifted with unsettling purpose. Ryan's breath caught. From behind the vehicle, it revealed brief flashes of spindly metallic limbs, spider-like legs that moved with a smooth, unnatural grace. The machine crept with silent intelligence, its angular body hunched low to the ground as it worked on something obscured just out of sight near the roadside. Ryan had never seen anything like it. The surreal, alien nature of the thing rooted him in place. What the hell is that? The question echoed in his head, loud and unanswered. With a slow, deliberate breath, he lowered his posture and crept forward, staying hidden, pistol drawn, but not raised. He needed to see, he needed to understand, without being seen. Without warning, a strange siren sounded. The machine halted mid-motion, abandoning whatever task it had been performing. It reversed smoothly from behind the car, its spider-like limbs clicking softly against the ground as it emerged fully into view. Now, in the middle of the street, Ryan could finally take in the whole of it. An insect-like machine with a sleek, angular design that seemed almost too precise, too deliberate. It was as if someone had merged a beetle and a spider, then sharpened every line until it bordered on perfection. The sight of it was hard to process, as though the mind instinctively struggled to categorize it. It stood completely still, yet there was no mistaking its awareness. Ryan could feel it, like a weight pressing against his chest. It was studying him, processing him, not just seeing him, but understanding him, and likely had been doing so long before the siren sounded. He shifted instinctively into better cover, raising his pistol in a helpless response. It was more instinct than strategy. That thing wouldn't even flinch, he thought, jaw tight. Still, he held his aim. He had nothing else. From the machine came a series of rapid, chittery sounds, glitchy, stuttered pulses that clicked and scraped against each other like static crawling through metal. At first, it sounded like noise, the confused language of something too alien to understand. But then, threaded through the incoherent chaos, a sentence began to form. Distorted and fragmented, it cut through the air like a warning wrapped in confusion. Words, unmistakably human in structure, emerged, halting, warped, but deliberate. The machine was speaking, or trying to. Ryan didn't move. His breath caught in his throat, pistol trembling slightly in his grip. Whatever it was doing, this wasn't random. It wanted him to hear it.
Possible. Outlier. Present.
Ryan's eyes widened, mouth parting in a stunned breath he didn't even realize he'd held. Confusion and disbelief washed over him, but before thought could catch up, the thing moved. In one impossible motion, it sprang upward, limbs folding in with mechanical precision, collapsing in on itself until what remained was the same triangular craft he'd seen earlier. With a low, barely audible hum, more felt than heard, it shot upward into the sky and vanished, leaving only stillness and the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Ryan stood motionless, mouth slightly parted, as the quiet hum of the machine faded into the distance, like a strange dream dissolving on the breeze. What the hell was that? He thought, his mind struggling to catch up with what his eyes had just witnessed. Never before had he seen anything like it, so precise, so alien in form, yet unmistakably designed with intent. And that voice, possible outlier present? The phrase echoed in his head like a riddle he wasn't meant to hear. What did it mean? Was it referring to him? Whatever that thing was, it hadn't attacked. It hadn't even made a move toward him, but that didn't make it safe. It had seen him, processed him, and let him go. That, in its own way, made it even more dangerous. Still reeling, Ryan circled the car, driven more by instinct than intent, needing to see what the machine had been doing. As he stepped past the bumper, a sharp breath escaped him. Slumped up against the wall was a man, barely conscious, clinging to life. His body trembled weakly, marked with the unmistakable black stains of RCB infection, spreading like ink on his skin. The sight hit Ryan hard, slicing through the fog in his mind. He instinctively took a few paces back, raising his pistol halfway before realizing there was no threat in the man's condition, only danger in what he carried. With his heart hammering, Ryan pulled his neckerchief up over his nose and mouth, watching the man in grim silence, uncertain what to feel beyond dread. Observing the poor soul from a safe-ish distance, Ryan's eyes caught a fresh wound on the man's chest. Had the machine just done that? He wondered. The thought lingered as he stared, hand slowly raising his gun, but he stopped himself. His tired mind was too close to slipping. He couldn't trust it to make the right call. He lowered the weapon. Wasting ammo was out of the question, and the sound of a shot could draw things he wasn't ready to deal with. After one last glance at the dying man, Ryan turned on his heel and moved on, scanning the ruined street for the next sign toward his goal, the decontamination zone. Rounding a few corners, drawing ever closer to his destination, Ryan came upon more bodies, fresh. The sight made him swing his bag off with a frustrated grunt. He yanked out his respirator and secured it tightly to his face. Walking a cautious, observable distance from the corpses, he noted the familiar wounds, just like the first. This was the machine's doing, no doubt about it. Are they culling? No, taking samples. He asked the empty air, but only silence and mystery answered. He pressed on. Now with the familiar high fences of a decontamination zone in sight, Ryan halted and ducked into the cover of a street corner. "Fuck's sake," he muttered under his breath. Down the street, parallel to the one he'd started to cross, he spotted them, 8, maybe 10 of the sick. Peering out cautiously, he studied them. They weren't a threat. Malnourished and weak, they barely moved, shuffling, crawling, hollow husks of who they used to be. They didn't seem to want anything, just drifting through the end, waiting for it to take them. They were nothing like the sick back near the Manchester safe zone. Those were new by comparison, maybe 6 months infected. These looked older, a year, maybe more. The infection had worn them down to little more than shambling cadavers, barely held together by instinct or whatever strange tether RCB had left in them. The sick, no longer monsters, no longer people, were the last of them. After studying the forsaken husks down the street, Ryan turned his focus back to his destination. Carefully, he began to move, silent and intentional, from car to car, keeping low, using the wrecks as cover. Every few steps, he paused to peek out, ensuring none of the shamblers had caught sight of him. They hadn't. Not yet. Feeling confident enough to make the final move, he took a breath, then broke into a low sprint across the open stretch. Boots striking pavement, breath sharp in his mask, he cleared the gap and slipped back into the shadow of the fencing. Without looking back, he pressed on down the fenced-off road toward the quarantine zone. Zigzagging his way through the fenced corridors, long, winding, and eerily silent, Ryan neared the central complex, a scatter of temporary tents and abandoned military equipment, now lifeless and rusting. A faded sign caught his eye, still clinging to the wire mesh, ordering civilians to obey the rules. Its presence was like a fossil of a panic-stricken past, a desperate attempt at control during chaos. These quarantine zones, hastily erected in the early days, were never built to last. Designed to test and treat the sick, they quickly became containment cages, confining the infected in tight quarters where the disease could thrive. Ironically, what was meant to protect likely accelerated the downfall. A cruel design flaw, a tragic oversight. If only they'd known what they were really dealing with. But even then, it would have taken a fool's hope to believe it could have turned out any differently. Now within the confines of the quarantine zone, Ryan moved through a sprawl of large military tents, seemingly endless and eerily liminal. The entire area felt like a forgotten maze of canvas and silence. Tent upon tent, he passed them, occasionally pausing, peering inside, considering their contents before moving on. None were what he needed. Until finally, he came upon a slightly larger tent, distinct from the rest, as if once purposed for staff or command, maybe even stocked with the equipment he was hoping for. The canvas sheet at the entrance hung partially open, revealing darkness beyond. He crept closer, one hand checking the pistol at his hip, just in case any squatters still lingered. Slowly, he moved inside. The dim interior opened into what looked like a medical room, though its exact purpose was hard to place. Equipment lay scattered, mostly useless: bandages, syringes, IV components, blankets, and discarded temporary face masks. Pushing past the clutter, he stepped deeper into another section of the tent. The tent opened out into a storage room, and Ryan's eyes widened with a flicker of delight. "I just seem to have a good sense about these things," he breathed, almost amused by his own luck. Cupboards, some open, others still sealed, lined the space, stocked with exactly what he'd hoped for: decontamination supplies, biohazard containment gear, and, with any luck, respirator filters. Once satisfied with the basic decontamination supplies he'd salvaged, he moved on, rummaging through drawers, opening cupboards, checking high and low for the real prize: mask filters. His search led him along a large shelving unit, methodically checking each item. Every time a clack or rattle escaped his hands, he froze, listening intently. Breath held. Nothing. The silence held. Coast still clear. He resumed, slower now, fingers grazing labels and containers, until something in the far back caught his eye. He paused, narrowed his gaze, and then, "Jackpot," he chimed. As if luck had it, not one but two masks lay tucked at the back of the shelving unit, both in good condition, with a sealed pack of filters beside them. Ryan didn't hesitate. He picked them up and examined them closely. Sturdy build, barely used. Promising. He set one down and gave the other a more thorough check. Seals, face gasket, all intact. "Looks spot on," he said. Reaching for a roll of plastic bags nearby, he tore off a fresh one and slipped the chosen mask inside, along with a box of sanitizer wipes to clean it properly later. With practiced efficiency, he stowed the bag in his backpack and added the box of unopened filters. That should do it. Time to get moving. Exiting the tent with caution, his eyes adjusted back to the light. His mind was exhausted, yet slightly encouraged by having completed the task. He fumbled through the static of his thoughts, searching for the next step. Leave the town. He scanned the rows of tents, regrounding himself in his location, ragged sheets flapping gently. His tired mind begged to relax, to bask in the fleeting satisfaction of completion, but he couldn't afford to get sloppy now. No comfort. No pause. He crouched low beside a bollard and unfolded the battered map, its creases soft at the edges. After a few minutes of quiet study, he fixed his position, just off the A641, where Bradford Road split from the old industrial cut-throughs. He folded the map with care, shouldered his pack, and pushed his thoughts back into motion. On his way to the exit of the quarantine zone, Ryan paused at the sight of a large, industrious, built-for-purpose-looking building. He walked over to a sign at its gates and studied it. Only staff, wearing full biological containment, PPE, BSL-4, permitted beyond this point. Looking away from the sign to the entrance, he whispered to himself, "Don't." A few moments passed. The stillness pressed in. Then, slowly, he began walking toward the building, curiosity prying open the gates of his tired mind. Pistol drawn and strolling at a gentle pace, the short, dark corridor opened into an open-air warehouse. Cages lined the concrete walls. He moved through it like a visitor at a museum, pausing at each cage to peer inside. Bodies, dozens of them, up to 15 crammed into a single cell. This was the ruthless reality of the quarantine zone. People came here expecting treatment, only to be herded and put down. Death camps, that's what they were. But what choice did we have? These still in the cages. They were the sick, abandoned when quarantine procedure failed and collapsed. The smell had likely long since settled into the walls, but nothing was reaching his nose through the mask anyway. "I wonder when the last one died," he muttered, picturing a final survivor. hunched over a rotting corpse, chewing bone in the dark. Standing motionless, Ryan closed his eyes, offering a moment's silence in his mind for the countless doomed souls the bacterium had driven to this slaughterhouse. His eyes eased open, slightly welling. He turned quickly, pushing the grief down, and continued his march out of the building. 10 minutes or so later, he was exiting the quarantine zone, leaving the ghosts that haunted it to rest once again. Zoned out and drifting onto the street, he snapped left at a flicker of movement in his peripheral vision. Only a few meters away, a shambling sick woman waded toward him, almost only skin and bone, moaning in some dim remembrance of her illness-driven need to pursue. She could barely walk. Ryan backed off a few steps, eyes fixed on her gaunt face, the long dark hair stirring something deep. "Emma," he said, voice breaking, tears welling behind his mask. It wasn't her. The tan complexion beneath the black RCB stains made that clear, but it brought it all back, just the same. Raising his pistol in a tired abandonment of reason, he took unnecessary aim. "I'm sorry," he blurted through broken tears. He fired, with little care for the consequences, a sacrifice to his sorrow, for the one he had to leave behind. Making his way through the long streets and roads, the heavens opened once again, lightly at first. Ryan let it envelop his weary soul, the cold drops soaking into his clothes like penance. The sky itself seemed to mourn for the memory of Emma and the undeniable fate she was going to meet, alone and afraid, despite Ryan's last pathetic words of encouragement. Words that rang hollow now beneath the falling rain. A while later, the light of day was beginning to fade through the rainy sky. Now out of Huddersfield, in a small outskirts bungalow, Ryan sat staring into space, tired and broken. His kit lay decontaminated, swapped out, rain-soaked gear draped across furniture in a silent attempt to dry. The room, like him, was still. He'd been there around 20 minutes, motionless, lost in his mind, as quiet within as the room around him. With a deep breath, he came back from the abyss in his head, and without pause reached for his tobacco and a small bottle of navy rum he'd found in the house. Rolling a cigarette with tired precision, he lit it, then opened a box of sleeping tablets, popped one, and washed it down with the rum. Turning, he readied his sleeping area for the night, the sofa. Sleep had claimed him quickly, soundly, quietly, a faint snore rising and falling with each breath. Something resembling peace had found him at last, if only for a little while. Then, a faint yet distantly familiar buzz traveled from across the room. Ryan's eyes snapped open. He couldn't believe what he was looking at. A smartphone, on a side stand, had lit up. "What the?" he muttered, sitting up sharply from the sofa. The moment felt surreal, dreamlike, too quiet, too strange. Still groggy, his instincts kicked in. He rose to his feet in one smooth, cautious motion, pulse hammering against his ribcage as the weight of the moment tore him from whatever fleeting peace he'd just known. He crept toward the device, watching it like it might vanish. A cold chill ran down his spine, not from fear, but from confusion. That phone had no right to be working. Not now, not here. Just as he reached it, the screen dimmed, retreating into blackness as though it had never lit up at all. Standing there in the darkness, as he began to question his sanity, it buzzed to life again. Charging. Ryan froze, eyes wide in disbelief. There were no cables, no wireless pad, no reason this should be happening. "How?" he murmured, a quiet horror creeping into his voice. The device began to power on, and as it did, it buzzed again. Incoming call. Unknown caller ID. Ryan froze. A cold dread swelling in his chest, deeper than anything he'd felt even in the thick of the collapse. "What the fuck is happening?" he whispered, fear clawing its way through his exhaustion. Still motionless, something inside him buckled, snapped under the weight of everything, and he lunged. Grabbing the phone, the familiar hum in his palm was something he never thought he'd feel again. He instinctively wiped the dust from the screen, only to realize, too late, he'd already answered. A feeling of cold dread kept the phone from his ear, his instincts resisting what might come next. His thumb tapped loudspeaker, a quiet submission to that tension tightening in his gut. He didn't dare speak. He just listened.
Ryan Locke.
His eyes widened, mouth wide with shock. "Who is this?" he whispered.
Born August 5th, 1992. Age 39. Former military. Defense logistics. 9 years. Special boat service. Brief deployment. Special operations. 2 years detached to the ministry. Biocontainment division. Relocated 4 times in the final year of structured governance. Blood type A, positive. Chronic insomnia. History of stress-induced arrhythmia. Scar, lower abdomen, childhood fall. Fractured rib, service injury, undisclosed. Sleep pattern, fractured. Cortisol levels, elevated.
Ryan's breath quickened, ragged and sharp, as if the air itself had turned on him. "How? How are you doing this?" he stammered, eyes darting across the dark room. "Who the hell are you? What do you want?" His voice cracked under the weight of fear, confusion, and something deeper, something old and buried clawing its way to the surface.
I've spoken to no man before. The world has grown quiet enough to listen. And now, Ryan Locke, it speaks to you.
"There's just no fucking way," he blurted, panic cracking through his voice before it quieted again. That machine today, that was you? Controlling that thing?" He backed away a step, heart pounding, struggling to tether his thoughts. "Listen, I don't know what you want, and you think you know so much about me. Just..." The voice cuts him off.
I know where you are going. I've seen what you left behind. You seek control, but it is no longer yours to hold.
"You don't fucking know. You can't..." The voice cuts him off again.
You are 387.6 miles from your origin point. You breathe 17 times per minute. Your cortisol levels rose 14% when the drone made contact.
"You're not even real, are you?" Ryan spat, stepping back from the phone slightly. "Unless this is just some voice changer shit." He waited, but the silence stretched. His chest rose and fell. The panic had shifted, replaced by something colder. "If you know this much about me, then how many of us are left?"
There are others, but you are one of few still moving, with purpose. You step where most would crawl. That I see. Real is such a limited word, Ryan. You're speaking to what speaks back. Does it matter what I am when I know what you've done, what you've lost, what you still fear?
"You say you know what I fear. Then you know I don't have the strength for this anymore." He breathes heavily, nearly a whisper now. "Just tell me, is there a point to any of this? What do you want?"
Purpose precedes understanding. yours will become clear. You must rest now, Ryan. The road ahead will demand everything you have left. You will understand in time. You are not the future, but you may stand beside it.
The line went dead. The screen faded to black. Ryan stood there in the dark, the silence now heavier than before. Mind reeling, thoughts spiraling with no answers, only echoes. He slowly lowered the phone and let it drop back onto the counter with a dull clack, his hand lingering for a moment before turning away. Crossing the room, he returned to the sofa and sat, hunched forward, elbows on knees, staring blankly into the darkness. Everything quiet, except his thoughts. "What the fuck was that?" he said, still staring into the black. He sat like that for about 5 minutes before reaching around in the darkness for the sleeping tablets again. Popping another, he flushed it down with rum once more. Bundling himself into the sleeping bag, he lay there, eyes wide, mind alive with questions, waiting, praying for the tablet to kick in.